Jose, thank you for sitting down with me.
Thank you very much.
All right, so I met you here at the FAM convention in New Orleans, where you're a representative of what organization?
I'm here with the National Life Without Parole Leadership Council.
Okay. And does that have a personal meaning to you?
Yeah, because I was a juvenile lifer, you know what I'm saying? So what the National Life Without Parole Leadership Council is trying to do, it's a project of Human Rights Watch, and so it was newly formed. There's 14 members on the council, and everybody on the council at one time had life without parole, whether juvenile life without parole or just life without parole in general. And so our mission really is just to start having that broader conversation about life without parole sentences and the abolishment of life without parole, not only for juveniles but for everybody.
Okay, so how old are you when you were sentenced to life without parole?
I was 16 years old.
Okay, do you want to talk a little bit about your life kind of leading up to that and what happened?
Yeah. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, so I was raised in Detroit, Michigan, with my grandparents. But prior to that, I was born in Puerto Rico, moved to Florida, moved to New York, and then eventually ended up in Detroit. So I was a normal kid. I went to school there in Detroit, public schools. I consider myself, I was a good student. And then things, just started going in a different direction for me around the age of 13. And so what happened was, at the age of 13, I ended up losing my mother to suicide. And I started, things just became harder for me. You know what I'm saying? Growing up, I went to streets and got involved in gangs. And I think one of the reasons, now that I can look back, I think one of the reasons that I got involved in gangs, because I think what I lost in my mom, which was that sense of family, even though I had my grandparents, I think that was the one thing that the gangs were good at doing. They were good at trying to make it look like, hey, we're a family. And so it's at that false sense of familyhood. And so that was, I think, what introduced me to being around violence and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? And so that's how I got involved in the gang business. And then eventually, literally 3 years later, I got involved in it was a drug deal that went bad. Both parties went there with the intent to rob each other. Both parties had weapons, and unfortunately, somebody ended up passing away. Somebody ended up paralyzed from the neck down. And as a result, I was charged as an adult, convicted, and then I was sentenced to life without parole with an additional 2 15 to 30-year sentences to run concurrent with that.
So I was 18 when I was sentenced to serve 32 years, and that crushed me. I can't imagine how you felt as a 16-year-old hearing that sentence.
At the time when it happened, of course it was a shock, right? Because I didn't know. I knew what being told that, hey, you're being sentenced to life without parole. I knew what that meant, right? But I don't think it was until later on, when I went into prison, and several years later, I think the reality of it really started to settle in. And I think when the reality of that sentence started to settle in, that's when I really knew, man, I really messed up here.
So you end up, do you go to adult prison at 16, or do they at least wait till you're 18?
No, in Michigan at the time, things are a little bit different now, but at the time, you automatically went to a prison that was, it was an adult prison, but it held those that were under the age of 21, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
But I ended up going, I didn't stay there until I was 21, you know what I'm saying? I went there, I was there for a year, and then I ended up going to another prison, you know what I'm saying? But initially when I went in, it was people who were under the age of 21, but they were all adults. But it wasn't just those, they also had other adults mixed in with it as well.
Okay, because I remember that was one of the most shocking things for me is I was at a prison where we had a non-smoking pod, and all the 16-year-olds were in the non-smoking pod, and I walk in and they're kids.
Right.
I was only 19 or 20 at the point, but I'm looking at these kids and I was like, they've already been in prison for
Right.
How is this possible?
Oh yeah, it's a horrible sight, man. Me going in there when I was in the youth home, because the whole time that I was fighting my case, I was actually in the Wayne County Youth Home. And then once I was sentenced, I didn't come back to the youth home. They took me from the court into the adult county jail. But I went in there when I got to prison, there were already juveniles there who I had served time with in the youth home. You know what I'm saying? So now all the guys that I was in there with were now here in prison. And it was, yeah, you're right, man. It's a real sad thing, man, to see a prison and just literally kids.
Yeah. So what you did, someone ended up losing their life. How do you feel about that? How did that shape you? How did that define you? How did you even feel about that at 16? How did you grapple with that?
Even then, I don't think I knew the real true ramifications of that, right? Of course, I understood the fact that I had took a life, but it wasn't until again, what I'm saying, as the realization of that sentence started to kick in, I really started to think about like the mother of the victims and the victims themselves. I mean, they were two 19-year-old twins, you know what I'm saying? And so I think the more insight I started to develop about, my life and the case that I had caught, I used to always think about like the mother of these twins. You have a mother who is in, she's the daily caretaker now of her son who's paralyzed from the neck down. And so because they were twins, like every day that she looked in the face of her son who survived, she was always reminded of the son that she lost, you know what I'm saying? And I think the more and more I start to understand that, the more and more that also helped me in the sense of like, I have to do something with my life, right? Because I caused this damage. How do I correct this? And I know I can't bring back the person who was lost. I know I can't correct or fix the damage that was done to the person that survived. But I knew within myself that I wanted to do something different, man. I wanted to do it because of that, because I really started to understand, the harm that I caused,
Was that something you did immediately in prison, or did you stay in the gang life or in the life when you first went in, or how long?
It wasn't immediately. I went in, and you're right. I'm saying, like, the very same gang that I was involved in when I went into prison. I mean, before I went to prison was there when I got there, and so when I got there, some of these gang members felt that, hey, here we have somebody he's doing life without parole, so he's never going home. You know what I'm saying? So let's elevate him to a position, a status. You know what I'm saying? And this is the person that's going to be running the penitentiary. You know what I'm saying, for years to come. And so I bought into that, and I think I bought into that again. As you look back and you reflect, I think I bought into that because, like, it was a survival tactic. I think it was. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like, going in at such a young age, here I am in this chaotic world, and I knew that, falling right into something that I was already familiar with was not, was something that was going to keep me safe. I mean, that's just the honest truth. Not, and so, but again, maturity. You know what I'm saying? As you get older, you start thinking different, man. And I just started to realize that it wasn't me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I finally started having that internal conversation, man. Like, man, this gang stuff, man, it really ain't you. You know what I'm saying? Because it wasn't like I grew into it or whatever. It wasn't like it was something that was passed down through family or something like that. You know what I'm saying? It was something that I got involved in at the age of 13, 14. And so, so it just, I just gradually, there came a time where I just gradually just started, just pushing away from it. Even though I still did have relationships, because, some of these guys I knew since we were kids, you know what I'm saying? So, and I think as I started to make that transition, a lot of them also understood and they respected what I was trying to do, you know what I'm saying? So, for some people it's hard to walk away from a gang lifestyle, but for me it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be.
Okay. So what did it feel like giving up that position or that power or that safety or that opportunity when you left?
It was easy. It wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be, because by then I had became my own person. I had grown into the man that I ended up becoming. So I was okay with that. I was okay with it. I learned how to stand on my own. You know what I'm saying? I had developed relationships not only with that gang, but with many other people. So it wasn't as hard. Like I said, it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be.
Because I always think about that. Antoine spoke this morning and he said, I was inside and I was tutoring and I was teaching and I was studying with no hope of release.
Yeah.
And that was my situation. When I had a 32-year sentence, when I was tutoring or mentoring or learning, I wasn't doing it because I thought it was going to get me out. I was doing it because I had to do something. Right. I wanted to live my life to the best of my ability in that place. And you basically gave up opportunities to be yourself, to live your best life in that place. And then did you have people that inspired you, or did you feel like that inspired other people?
Probably a little bit of both. What inspired me to just start living life different was actually, formerly incarcerated people who I was hearing, even though I didn't have maybe like personal relationship with these people, but I was hearing about these guys who were formerly incarcerated, who were coming out here and becoming advocates and was working, and that gave me a lot of hope. You know what I'm saying? That gave me a lot of hope, man. And so I knew that eventually I wanted to be that. You know what I'm saying? If I ever, and at this time, there was no talks about juvenile life without parole changing. But I always, in the back of my mind, there was always this thing, man, if I ever get an opportunity, I know what these men who have gotten out and are doing advocacy, I know what it does for me as somebody who's doing life. I want to give that back to somebody. I didn't know how that looked, but it was something that I wanted to do.
one of the most powerful things, because they didn't let speakers into the prisons I was at very often, but they let a guy come back in who had been there 2 years earlier. We all knew him. He was a tutor in the school. We knew what he was into. And when he came back in, he said, I want you all to know, like, you're not forgotten. Like, I'm out here and I got you. Like, I'm going to remember you and I'm going to fight for you. And it was a gym full of people in tears because it was the first time somebody had come back in and be like, yo, I still remember you. I still know what this is like. And that was transformational because I feel like I was already on that path, but I know some people were like, man, maybe I do have a chance. Maybe I can change. Maybe I can figure something out. So it sounds like you're having that impact.
Oh yeah. I mean, I get calls all the time, man. You know, I was fortunate enough, and we'll get into my reentry thing that I was doing, but I was fortunate enough to be able to, like, you know, give back, man, in a major way. You know what I'm saying? As far as, like, I mean, I literally met guys at the door who didn't have no family when they were coming home. You know what I'm saying? Other juvenile lifers. You know what I'm saying? Like, I literally, you know, went throughout the state, not because I had to. Even though I was doing reentry work and working for an agency that was doing reentry work, it wasn't required of me to, like, go and pick somebody up. You know what I'm saying? But the moment I would find out that somebody was coming home who didn't have no family, I would be the first one to volunteer. Say, hey, I'll go pick them up. You know what I'm saying? And it felt great. It felt great not only for me to know that that they knew there was somebody there waiting for them, you know what I'm saying? But then, you know, for my own personal reasons, I was getting to relive that moment again, you know what I'm saying? And you know, it just kept me grounded, man, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, this is where you came from. This is where you came from. Don't forget this, you know what I'm saying? And it's been an amazing journey, man.
So what was your own reentry process like? When did you find out? Well, first of all, you went in at 16.
Mm-hmm.
How old were you when you got out of prison?
I was 43. I was 43 when I got out. You know, one of the biggest, going back a little bit more, but one of the biggest moments of transformation, and I share this story all the time. I was sitting in a segregation cell. I was probably like 13 years into my sentence, right? And even then, even though at that time I was like on the fence, you know what I'm saying, as far as with the gangs and prison politics and all that, I was on the fence. But at this moment in my incarceration, all my appeals had been exhausted. I didn't have no attorney, you know, working on nothing because there was nothing to work on. I had been designated as a security threat group member. I was placed in segregation in a maximum security prison. Like in Michigan, aside, you know, you got life without parole, but I mean, it don't get no worse than that. You know what I'm saying? You're in segregation because STG. You're restricted. You're already restricted for being in segregation. You know what I'm saying? Then you have STG on top of you. And so I was sitting there in my cell one time in segregation. I was having a conversation with God, right? And it was a conversation with God. It was a conversation with myself. I was looking around in the cell and I was like, this can't be it for me. You know what I'm saying? Because I almost felt like I was buried alive. You know what I'm saying? Like, there has to be more to life than this, right? And then, like, literally, like 2 weeks after I had that internal conversation, I got a letter from the ACLU. At the time, there's an attorney by the name of Deborah LaBelle out of Michigan who was doing a study about life without parole for children. She sent me this letter saying, hey, we're doing a study. We want to know if you want to participate. And when I got out of segregation, after that situation there, like, that really did it for me. You know what I'm saying? That really did it, man. And I seen that light at the end of the tunnel, man, get a little bit brighter. I went and bought me a typewriter. And I mean, I was writing letters to everybody and anybody that would hear or who was willing to listen about juvenile life without parole. So then, you know, fast forward, you know, 2012 came. You know what I'm saying? 2012 came, the Miller decision came down, you know, with the Supreme Court, which ruled it was unconstitutional to mandate a life without parole sentence for children. But Michigan was one of the states where we had an attorney general who fought us all the way to the end as far as the retroactivity aspect of it. So for 6 years, you know, we were going back and forth in the Michigan courts about the retroactivity. And finally, in 2016, the Montgomery case was decided in the Supreme Court, which made the Miller case retroactive. But the way the Michigan legislation at the time when that all went down was, you know, the prosecutors in each individual county had the option of, okay, out of the cases that we have in our county, who do we want to pursue life without parole on again, and who do we want to concede to a term of year sentence? And so when that happened, I ended up somehow on the list of those that they wanted to reseek the life without parole sentence again, you know? And by this time, you know, I had been years misconduct free. I had participated in a bunch of programming, mentoring programs. I had started a book club. I was training service dogs. I was doing prisoner observation aid for those that were on suicide. So I was doing like a lot of good stuff, and I couldn't understand why it was that they were still pursuing life without parole on me. And initially I was a little upset about it. I'm like, but then I thought to myself, like, I know my case, I know my record, I know when that time comes, even if they do pursue life without parole on me, I still believe that I can prove that I'm worthy of that second chance and stuff like that. So a year after that, I went back to my attorney and told my attorney, hey, why don't we go back to the prosecutor and instead of waiting for this long process, let's outline exactly what it is, why it is I believe that I deserve 10 years. And so he's like, all right, let's do it. You know what I'm saying? So I literally got on that same typewriter that I bought originally. I typed out like a 15 or 20 page motion, and I was like as transparent as anybody can be about my whole history, my life history, my prison history, the good, the bad, the ugly, and all my accomplishments that I had been incarcerated. And we sent that to the prosecutor, man, and literally within weeks, we got a response and saying they agreed to a term of year sentence, and so I went back in 2018. It was May 2018. When it got resentenced, they gave me a 30 to 60 year sentence. By then, I already had 27 years served in with 5 years of good time disciplinary credits. And by October of 2018, I had gained my parole and got released.
Wow. What was that moment like when you're walking outside the gate for the first time in 27 years?
Oh man, it was something, man. It was something. It was a breath of fresh air, man. I'll never forget it, man. Like I live it like daily. I'm always reminded of it daily, man. Like, to go in there at such a young age and be told that you were gonna die there, man. Like, and here I am walking out. And just also like, it felt good to know that I was part of that process. You know what I'm saying? I know there's a lot of people out here that worked on that. I know there was, there all these court rulings and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? But to know that I actually typed up a motion, that got the ball rolling for me. That was also, it was fulfilling. It was a proud moment for myself, man. But my sister and a good, my best friend and his wife, they're the ones who actually came to pick me up. It was just, man, it felt great, man. Like, the weight of the world had finally lifted off of me.
And you talk about going back. I want to hear about your reentry journey or how you were helping others. But I was able to go pick a friend of mine up the year after I got out and go pick him up and go to the gate. Yeah. And that was I was numb when I got out. Like, it was crazy. It was bright. It was colorful, but I was kind of numb. But when I went to hit, that was when it really hit me. Like, I was here to pick my friend up from prison, and it was just a powerful thing. And you get to experience that all the time.
Oh, yeah. I experienced it, man, on so many occasions. You know what I'm saying? And it's there's nothing like it,
Okay, so how did you get into doing reentry work?
Well, when I got out, one of my hurdles coming home was the fact that because I was born in Puerto Rico, I didn't have a birth certificate, right? And not to say that we didn't have a birth certificate there, but it was sometimes, during my incarceration, somehow somebody thought to invalidate there was a lot of identity fraud going on with Puerto Rican birth certificates. So when I got out, I didn't have a birth certificate. You know what I'm saying? And right before I got out, they tried to get it, but for whatever discrepancies came up, I couldn't get it, right? So I tried. I would have court records, newspaper articles, everything you can think of, man. My grandma still had school IDs, you know what I'm saying? And I would go to Secretary of State and I would present all this stuff, like, if you don't have your birth certificate, you can't get it, you know what I'm saying? And so I ended up having to work like under the table work, doing under the table work, getting paid cash. But during this year, when I was, working under the table and stuff like that, you know what I'm saying, I would always hear about little different events that were going on, and I would go, check out the events, where formerly incarcerated people were gathering, and things like this, like these type of events. And there's an organization in Michigan called the State Appellate Defender's Office. The State Appellate Defender's Office is a public defender office, and they were the ones who were doing the vast majority of the resentencings for the juveniles. Well, when they started a program they called Project Reentry. And so Project Reentry, every month, aside from all the other reentry work they do, every month they have workshops. So every month, you might this month it might be a workshop on how to use your phone. Next month it might be on how to improve or how to establish credit. And so I heard about these workshops before I came home, so I started going to the workshops, right? And so it was a real great place, man. Where a lot of formerly incarcerated, not only juvenile lifers, but just formerly incarcerated people in general, were gathered there with, and have these discussions, and we would share resources. I'm saying, hey man, there's a job over here, they're doing this, they're doing that, And so during my time in, going to these workshops, like towards, I mean, like the timing couldn't have been better, because like towards the end of that year without that birth certificate, I get the birth certificate, I went and got a license, went and got a car from a dealership that I was working in, they were paying me under the table. And right when that happened, they ended up getting a grant. They got a federal grant, and they posted a job for reentry specialist. And so one of the attorneys that worked there, she suggested, hey, why don't you apply for the job? We're also inviting formerly incarcerated to apply for it as well. Like, oh yeah, give my shot. So I submitted my resume, and to my surprise, out of I think it was like 100 some people or something that applied for it, I was like one of like 13 people who interviewed for it with absolutely no experience in reentry. You know what I'm saying? But I had a passion, and I had a passion of wanting to help people out. You know what I'm saying? I think that was the thing that got me in the door, man. And I got interviewed, and I was very open and honest about what I did know and what I didn't know. And like several days after, I got the call like, hey, you've been accepted as a part-time reentry. And so that started my journey with the reentry work.
Well, and I want to make an important point. You say you had no experience with reentry. You had the most important experience with reentry.
Yeah, I guess.
You
yeah,
knew what it was like.
I knew what it was.
Yeah.
At the time, well, I didn't see it that way. You know what I'm saying? I just like knew, hey, I have a passion to want to help some people out. And another thing too, like, during it when I got out, I had family members, I had friends, and I often used to think to myself, like, man, I wonder what this would be like without the help that I had.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I can only imagine how hard it is. You know what I'm saying? And even like during that year, I ended up like reaching out to a couple guys who had came home, and they would tell me like, man, I need some help. And just so happened, because of the workshops, I was like, hey man, well at the workshop I learned this and that, And so I was already doing reentry work. I didn't even know that's what I was doing. You know what I'm saying? I was just helping guys out. But yeah, that took things took off from there.
It's amazing. So what did your life look like for those years you were doing reentry work?
There what we were doing were creating, like, one of the things we were doing was creating reentry plans, right?
Okay.
So let's say, for example, there was an attorney that said, hey, I have a client who's in the process of either going to the parole board or having a Miller hearing to go back and get resentenced as a juvenile lifer, or not even juvenile, just in general. We need a reentry plan, you know what I'm saying? So I would send this person a questionnaire about, like, everything, where they're gonna go home, what their needs are. And based on that, and based on Zoom meetings that I would have with them from the inside, we would create a reentry plan. You know what I'm saying? So let's say, for example, he said, well, I'm going to my mom's to live. Well, I would connect with the mother, confirm with the mother this is where they're going to live at. I would create a housing investigation. So sometimes I would even go to the house, take pictures of the room, take pictures of the house, and all that I would compile that into a plan. And then that would be submitted, to, when they go get resentenced. So the judge would actually see, okay, this person is just going to get released. They actually have a plan. You know what I'm saying? If they need some services, if they need some substance abuse, I would reach out to like substance abuse agencies and say, hey, I got a guy coming home. Are you willing to give him these services? You know what I'm saying? So I would like literally, not just put it on paper and say, okay, this person's going to have these services. Like I would get like a confirmation letter from the agency saying that we will, provide these services. And so that was one aspect of it. Another aspect was parole prep. You know what I'm saying? So for those who were going up for parole, because I had experienced the parole process, I would get on Zoom meetings with them, and we would have like mock parole hearings. And the good thing about it, I think for me, somebody who was formerly incarcerated, was that, when these guys were, on that Zoom meeting with me and we're having mock parole hearings, if I hear BS, I'm going to call them on it. You know what I'm saying? And I was talking to them in the language that we understand each other from. You know what I'm saying? From being inside. And I tell them, okay, that's what, that's the BS. Now tell me the truth. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of times they would like, man, you're right, man. So I said, listen, bro, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. You know what I'm saying? And I would ask them the tough questions. I would ask them the tough questions and really, really prepare them for that parole hearing. And there was a lot of success. Like the vast majority of them ended up getting paroles granted. With the reentry plans, you know what I'm saying? Some of the reentry plans resulted in some people getting lesser sentences than they originally thought they were going to get, based on those reentry plans. And then just like once the guys got out, you know what I'm saying, helping them implement those reentry plans, because sometimes you got guys who've been gone for decades, and it looks good on paper, but I have no clue how to get this started. You know what I'm saying? So I was going back to going to the prison to pick them up. You know what I'm saying? Like I would literally meet them at the door for those who didn't have the family, for those who didn't have friends, to pick them up. We were able to make some connections where, like, you know, I'll get a phone from this organization, I get a couple $100 from this organization. You know, we had a church that we had made a connection with, so this church provided like big duffel bags full of clothes and all type of stuff, all new stuff for juvenile lifers, you know what I'm saying? So I would get their sizes. And so literally when I got to the prison, here goes a bag of stuff, here goes a couple of gift cards, here's a telephone, here goes my number, let's get this thing started, you know what I'm saying? And so it was an amazing journey, man. I loved it.
Okay, and that's huge, but that's not what you're doing now, right?
No. So during the 4 years that I was doing this reentry work, I was also mixed in with that was a lot of advocacy work. You know what I'm saying? Because I think actually it goes hand in hand. You know, I was working with a state rep with a bill on vital records. You know what I'm saying? Because of my experience that I have, you know what I'm saying? I wanted to make sure that others coming behind me had vital records. So I went and testified in front of the committee at there in Michigan for the vital records. The bill actually made it through the House. It got passed in the House, and right now we're waiting to get a sponsor on the Senate side to actually get that bill through. And even though the Michigan Department of Corrections had made a lot of improvements in making sure that people come home with actual state IDs, what we don't want to happen is we don't want for a different administration to come in and then all of a sudden that program goes away. So we want to make sure that it's set in stone, it's set in law. That way, moving forward, those coming home have you know the proper records. And then just working with like the campaign for the fair sentencing of youth, who I am now employed by now. Immediately when I walked out of prison, like one of the first organizations that I connected with was ICANN, the Incarcerated Children's Advocacy Network, because I had heard about them on the inside. The moment I learned how to use Facebook Messenger, I reached out to who is now the executive director, Xavier McElrath Bay, and he connected me with that network. And so I was doing a lot of work with them, you know, going to other states and different convenings, and I just like really felt a connection, man, with advocacy work. You know what I'm saying? So I was doing advocacy work, I was doing reentry work, and then eventually, you know, I landed a position with the campaign now. So I'm doing that now full time, and so now what I'm actually the Michigan campaign coordinator to push specifically for the legislation in Michigan to end, you know, life without parole for kids.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So you talked about the kind of guilt you had or the driving force you had to make sure you've done something with your life. Do you feel like you've lived up to that? Do you have greater aspirations? What is it you want your impact to be?
Oh yeah, you know, one of the things, you know, going back when I got resentenced, I told the judge when I got resentenced that, you know, I wanted to make something good come out of something bad, right? For me, even though I would have came out here and worked just about anywhere as far as, you know, as far as employment, I would have done anything, right? But for me internally, that wasn't enough. You know what I'm saying? It just wasn't enough for me, man. You know what I'm saying? I really understand the impact I had on that family. I really understand the impact my crimes had on my family, and just for myself. You know what I'm saying? Just for myself. When I look back at that 16-year-old kid, there's a sense of, you know, I owe that kid something. You know what I'm saying? Like I put that kid in a real horrible situation. You know what I'm saying? Not only, you know, the situation of me receiving life without parole and unfortunately, you know what I'm saying, the tragic taking of life, you know, but I myself could have lost my life in that incident, you know what I'm saying? So I felt that, you know, I owed that 16-year-old child an opportunity to become the person that he would have become had he not, you know what I'm saying, you know, taken, you know, a different direction in life, you know. And so far, thank God, so far, you know, I think I've been able to live up to that. And I'm going to continue on. You know what I'm saying? I just, you know, I've been doing this work. I've been fortunate enough, man, to be surrounded by some really great people. I've been mentored by some really great people. And I just want to keep on going. I want to keep on going. You know, right now, again, I'm working on ending life without parole for juveniles in Michigan. But working with the CFSY, which is a national organization, I'll also be able to have an impact across this country, and hopefully one day we can look up and say that, you know, nowhere in this country, you know, children are being sentenced to that term.
That's amazing. Thank you very much for talking to me, and yeah, I look forward to the rest of the event.
No doubt. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Thanks, sir.